And welcome to VR Verdict Podcast, episode 86, our weekly VR podcast where we talk about everything VR. I am PJ.
I'm Wookie.
And today we're joined by Cyril and Simeon.
Hi everyone. I'm
Hello.
Cyril.
We're here to talk about a couple of games that you guys have both made and are making and still updating. So quite a bit to go to talk about. But this is your second appearance on our podcast, so welcome back. How's it been since your last one?
Well, we've been busy as when we talked, we just had launched Stones of Harlath, and we were in the process of updating it with quality of life updates. And I think that on your show we announced that we were also working on more fun content than just quality updates, quality of life updates. And since then we shipped that fun content, which was our update 1.3. The arenas, which was the brainchild of Simeon. So Simeon, if you want to kind of...
Yeah, arenas was a fun addition to make. It was nice because it got to expand on all the fun parts of the other part of the game, the parts that I enjoyed, programming and designing. And Cyril got to compile some more levels, design some more art. So it was a fun update.
Yeah, that was a different process, because when we started working on Stones of Harlath, there was a lot of content already there for Simeon, and then we took the reverse approach for Arena. I kind of whipped out. Actually, the first arenas were built by Simeon, where he kind of used some of my assets and kind of mocked something kind of quickly. And then I kind of went back and kind of polished, made the lighting and all of that stuff, and then changed a few of them. But Simeon was really the driver behind the design for arenas, because he wanted to kind of pace the fights certain ways and things like that. So it was kind of a case of hey, have fun with this, and then I'll kind of do the polish pass.
Awesome. Is it kind of neat to, you worked on the game one way and then kind of just reverse it and mix it up and do a totally different thing with the same game?
Yeah, I mean, the thing also is that, when for Simeon, for example, when he arrives on a game where there is a whole bunch of stuff that are already decided, it's not necessarily always super fun. So I think it was also kind of cool to kind of so that he have I'm kind of speaking for him now. Simeon, what do you think?
Oh, he's just a square. I mean,
I am just a square. It's true.
It's some texture, man.
I know, right? But
he's a coder, right? I mean, I should have dressed him up. Next time I'll draw a face. I swear.
I'm made out of math. Anyway. Yeah, but I mean, that's one of the beauties of collaboration is we get to switch things up. It's the ebb and flow of ideas, passing things back and forth. I have an idea and it gets actualized by both of us. Cyril has an idea and we see how it plays out. So that's definitely one of the advantages of working with a group.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's the arena was particularly fun because I kind of got to experience the fights, to discover them as I was playing them. So there was an element of surprise that I did not have for the rest of the game. I don't know. We don't really have any metrics to kind of see how many of our existing players are actually engaging with the arenas. But if we have some people that follow that podcast and that are players of Stones of Harlath, I really recommend that you try it. It changes the game quite significantly, and it's a lot of fun. I actually even fire up the arenas every now and then just for the pleasure.
And for anyone listening, and both Wookiee missed when they were on the podcast the first time, all their games are I'll let you guys explain a little better, so if I mess it up, I apologize. But they're all pixel art and old school theme. Stones of Harlath is both melee combat and magic, and all the sprites, kind of similar to Shock Troops on the screen here. There, it's all like old 16-bit, 18-bit pixel art graphics and stuff, and it's really neat, especially in VR.
Like a super updated version, like with the health bar of like the old school Wolfenstein and stuff like that. So I was kind of digging it. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's well, that's kind of the concept, right? When I started making games, and it's a while now. It's almost 20 years. Pixel art is what I knew really well, and so I'm relatively new to 3D. I've done a lot of 2D games, and so I've done a lot of like 2D pixel art games. And so when I came to 3D, I kind of like kept that kind of pixel art aesthetic because that's something. It's my generation. I'm a child from the 70s, so I grew up playing video games in the 80s, and that's what we played, and that's what I know well. And for VR, well, there are really two aspects of it. The first one is that, well, first of all, it's optimized, because particularly for something like Quest, we have like smaller textures because they are pixel art. They are crisp. There are a lot of modern games that do like textures that I find very blurry on the Quest because obviously they are compressed and everything. And with pixel art, we can actually stay completely crisp. And I believe it looks good. A lot of people when I tell them, oh, it's VR, it's 3D, and it's a mix of 3D and pixel art, people usually make a face. But once they experience it, they kind of understand what I mean. It looks good in headset. It looks crisp and detailed. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it's also it allows me to kind of like work faster because I work with smaller textures. So it allows me to kind of like, as you can see on the screen, you have like environments that are quite detailed for a Quest game. Imagine if I had like materials and bump maps and like a whole bunch of stuff like at higher resolution, it would take me forever to make an environment. Like here, I can make a full map in a week. So it allows me to kind of like work much faster. And the last thing is that there are not that many games that do that in VR. So it kind of allows us to kind of like look a little bit original.
Yeah, like when Stones of Harlath, get in there and it's really gorgeous and it's really neat because like just in old school games, like all the models like follow, you look at them, they're always looking at you no matter where you're at type of thing. So it's really neat to be in there. It is very special.
Yeah, they are. We call that billboarded. So that means that they follow the camera. They always face the camera. And yeah, that's a trick also to allow us to not have to kind of like animate, like in Doom, for example, where you have the sides and things like that. Here we just basically always have the characters facing you.
The trees in Mario 64.
Yes, and it's. I mean, it's as I said, it's a choice of convenience. It's an aesthetical choice. Like it just kind of like a perfect storm. Like it makes more sense with a smaller team to kind of like approach it that way, and it looks original. I believe it looks good. Some people will disagree, right? Some people absolutely hate that concept, and that means that the game's not for them. But for those of us that are kind of like that kind of retro vibe and things like that, it's kind of cool to experience it in VR. And that's the thing, right? It's like, it's not because VR is a modern medium that we cannot play with it, and try like stuff that is not necessarily going to be photorealistic. I mean, that's the style. That's I do.
And if you grew up playing these type of games, like we all at this table have, like, it's a whole new experience to see in VR, and it's really like, it's epic to just step into the world and be like, holy crap. Like, it's just, you really feel like you're in the world thanks to VR. And when you said it helps you. Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. I did not mean to interrupt.
Oh, I was just going to say, you saying that it allows you to work faster. Like, again, when Stones of Harlath launched, you guys were updating really fast, getting feedback from all the users, and you were just really right on top of it. And now you have a new game coming out that's announced that, I mean, obviously you are working really fast, which you mentioned last time that I can't remember the exact length of time you started from start to finish with Stones of Harlath, but it was a quick turnaround.
Yeah, it's about a year and a half per project, and anything past a year and a half, I would become bored with it. I'm an indie because I like to kind of like try new stuff. I would love to work one day on a game like World of Warcraft, or like, I'm a big fan of World of Warcraft, or like Destiny. I'm also a big fan of Destiny. But I know, like, there is a part of me that's like, how do they do that? How do they work on the same project for 4 years, 5 years? I'm used, I come from advertising. I was working in advertising, and so I'm used to kind of like fast-paced project. It's like you do one thing, you do it for 2-3 months, and then you kind of like move on to something else.
Yeah. And with the way you guys have it set up, Wookie, they talked about this last time too. Like with just for VR, like Theta Legion is similar to this. I think this is like a spiritual successor, and like it's still in the same metaverse. But they did sci-fi, and then they did fantasy with magic and combat, and now they're going back if you guys did a game every year and a half and mixed it up, like, I would just love that, because that means there's always something new to play, something to do. So.
Oh yeah, Shock Troops is planned to ship by the end of next year, which means that by the middle of next year I will already have it. I've started working on the next project. So that's also another thing that I like to do, is to kind of stagger things. So because I usually start working ahead, kind of by myself, kind of play with some ideas and things like that. When someone like Simeon or someone like Michel, for example, that is the coder for Shock Troops, when they arrive, there is already kind of a base of content that is in there. So I try, because I have a full-time job, like the last thing that I want is them to wait for me for content. So I always try to be a little bit ahead of what they are working on. So that means that there will be a point where like my part of the content will be finished, and there is always like little stuff to do on the UI, or like little polish stuff, or like a game design pass and things like that. But it will most likely leave time. I don't know, like towards May of next year, where I will be kind of like starting thinking and playing with like concepts and art and builds for what the next project is. And by then, I will most likely be tired of sci-fi. So by then, it will most likely be back to fantasy.
That's awesome, though. And it helps you stay creative, and it helps with like your games come out so quick. So if there's like a major change or major like a technological leap in VR, you can actually keep up with that stuff. Where like a game that takes 4 years, like just say Half-Life Alyx, for example, was in development from almost the beginning of VR. So when it came out, there it still had like the old school like pop-up menus and stuff. Like you could still tell it was kind of in between worlds almost. So that really helps you guys stay up to date. It's pretty neat.
Well, that's absolutely true. And that for that matter, that's a thing that I experienced when I did my first VR game, which was Theta Legion on the Go. Between the moment I decided and started working on Theta Legion on the Go and the moment we shipped, Facebook had announced the Quest. And we were like, okay, yeah, the Go is not going to last long with like a far superior hardware that is coming on the tail of it. So we have now a game, and it's good because like Theta Legion on the Go was developed in 6 months. Wow. So we had like a very, very compressed timeline on that, and that's the reason why the game is kind of smaller. That's also one of the reasons why it's free on the Go. It's like we realized we are like, okay, yeah, we picked that machine, but we are not going to see a long tail of sales because everybody's going to flock to the Quest. We are on the wrong hardware. So you're absolutely correct. Like 4 years, you're taking a lot of risks. So if you're a big studio, I guess you can. But if you're a small team of indie, you need to kind of reduce your risk as much as you can, and you need to go to market fast. And more importantly, like to me, it's like, again, like working 2 or 3 years on the same thing, like the excitement disappear. I'm having a time of my life making the environments for Stones of Harlath, or making the environments for Shock Troops and things like that. Like that's something that I'm enjoying myself, and I don't want it to be ever something where I'm going to kind of like pester that I have. Oh, I can't believe I have to work on Shock Troops. Right? That cannot happen. It needs to be a pleasure, and so it needs to be fresh and exciting.
Did I interrupt you earlier, Wookie? Were you going to say something?
I don't recall.
Okay, sorry. Going back to like Theta Legion, and with the pixel art style, like still in VR, like that game was still kind of like creepy, and it was awesome. And if you're listening or watching this, there'll be a link to my video of it. There's this tiniest little jump scare when an alien first pops out. You kind of see me just whoop like that, just a little bit. But it was still like the atmosphere, and with like the flashlight and stuff, it's still crazy that you can have the same feel as like a more like photorealistic game type, like you were saying. It doesn't matter, like it just works.
Yeah, well, and the thing is that the people forget that fear has nothing to do with visual, right? The way you scare people is by kind of like building anticipation and depriving them from their senses, or depriving them from like knowledge of what's going to happen and things like that, and having something at stake. So when you're playing a game, obviously you don't want to die, you don't want to have to restart the level, and most likely the part that you're talking about is like when you're in the kind of like underground level with all the water, and you can hear the drips and the music is kind of suspenseful. There is not much happening, so we are building tension, and then you open a door, and then boom, you have an alien right in your face. Yes, of course, that's going to make you jump, no matter what the graphics are, because it's all based on like the tension that we established before. We are so Shock Troops is going to be bigger, better. Obviously, the next game is we are always trying to kind of like push the boundaries of what we've done previously. But I do expect a pretty intense horror section in Shock Troops. And so that's also another thing, the same way that I like to kind of like keep my development cycles somewhat short. I mean, even though a year and a half, for an indie studio, that's still a lot of time. There is the same philosophy with the levels. Like, for example, I like to keep the levels. Like, I don't want a level that you take like an hour to finish, right? Because I want to change. Like, it's like, okay, well, here you're in a derelict spaceship, but like 20 minutes later, you'll be outside, like in a space station. And then 20 minutes later, you'll be on a planet that rains fire. And then 20 minutes later, etc., etc. But that also allows us, with that type of content, to have like some levels that are going to be like super high octane action, and then some levels that are going to be way creepier, where maybe we'll leverage the flashlight and we'll leverage the sound and we'll really try to scare the bejesus out of people. Because there is nothing better than to see like someone like streaming our game and like jump or scream as they are playing. It's like, yep, mission accomplished.
Yeah. And those level designs, not being so long, it's really a perfect fit for VR, because you have all kinds of extra things. Like it's extra energy to put the headset on and react, because it's like your full body. You have battery constraints if you're using a wireless, like the Quest. All kinds of things, like fatigue for standing too long if your game doesn't make the person move. So just those short, it's a really good fit. You're doing it really well, I think.
Yeah, and just like having like that thing on your face for like more than like 30 minutes or an hour, I mean, it gets in the way, right? Even though like some headsets are like, they try to kind of design them for comfort. I know, for example, that I rarely play more than an hour at a time. Like I need to take a break. I need to take my headset off. And so that's the thing is with the levels like in Stones of Harlath or in Theta Legion or in Shock Troops, what we want the players to accomplish something meaningful in the time that they are in VR. And so I know that like some people complain that Stones of Harlath was a little too short. We realized that it was shorter than we thought it would be. We thought that people would actually take more time to kind of like clear some dungeons than we realized. So that was definitely a surprise on our hand. We felt, it's a good 5 to 6 hour game. While in reality, for most people, it was a 3-hour game. I think that's kind of like the average. Some people, you can clear the game in less than that if you speedrun it. But I would say that for most people that kind of take their time and things like that, it's about 3 hours, not counting the arena, because the arena itself the fight lasts at the very minimum 45 minutes. So I would say for most people, it had an hour and a couple more minutes of combat. But we wanted people to kind of like, hey, you know what, you're going to play one dungeon and then you're going to kind of remove your headset and do something else. And we want you to kind of feel that you have accomplished something in that dungeon, not something that it takes you 3 hours, right?
Yeah, and the other thing I love about it, that makes it totally more accessible because, you know, a lot of times, you know, on weekends, like I game a lot, but like on weeknights, it's like I got half an hour, 45 minutes, and it's just more accessible. And just, I love the auto saving and stuff because I hate like playing bigger games or, you know, you got to hit the button, start, save, and constantly do that. With your games, everything seems to auto save perfectly. And it just, like you said, you accomplish something, you can take the headset off, go do something, and you feel like you enjoyed it. But with Stones of Our Life, I can tell you, I've played the opening 3 or 4 times now because I played it on Quest when it first came out. Then I played the Rift version when it first came out, and then I had to factory reset my Quest due to some issue. So I've started a third time, and you know, I've really explored the entire map. Even though I've already seen it twice, I'm still like, I go to every nook and cranny in case I miss something. So I appreciate that there's stuff to find. And like you said, you know, some people you can speed run it and you can go through it. But I'm one of those weirdos that really spends time staring at a tree for a while, and then I'll go look at some grass, and then I'll fight.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, and this is the way we play. Like that's VR, right? I mean, like I've seen some people play the game and like beeline, like, I mean, it's like, I don't know, like when I'm like the first thing, like when I arrived in Special Aid, I talked a little bit with like Justin, and then I was like, hey, do you mind if I kind of like do a tour? Like because I kind of explored and I take the time to kind of look around and kind of like take the experience in, right? I mean, and so if you play like that, then you're going to get a lot of hours out of Stones of Harlath. But if you're like, I mean, if you're trying to speedrun it, then yeah, I mean, it's, but like I would argue that you have like some AAA games that can be achieved, that can be kind of like completed in like 1 hour, 2 hours, if you speedrun them. So it really depends on how you play. Obviously, that's something that we are very aware of for Shock Troops. So we are going to kind of like make sure that we have like enough content. More content, and I think also one thing that I did is I was concerned that some of the dungeons. So there was a big discussion that Simeon and I had when we were making the game is who was the target audience. Because when we started the game, we were like, okay, it's a dungeon crawler, so like we are going to kind of like, are we designing this for like dungeon crawlers, like, you know, hardcore people? And I'm talking about dungeon crawlers, like I'm talking about like Dungeon Master or Ultima Underworld or like Stygian Abyss or like, you know, like those kind of like dungeon crawlers. Are we designing for like that very kind of like hardcore niche of people, or are we kind of like trying to make the game more accessible? And then I got some data from Facebook, and we kind of like tried to kind of look for like niche of people that were not necessarily completely tapped yet. And so they were like, there was a big presentation that I saw on YouTube made by someone that works at Facebook that was explaining that the coming years would be the years of people that were kind of like not semi-casual, but they were searching for experiences, meaningful experiences, and light storytelling. And so we kind of decided, it's like, I think that this is a good fit for us. So we simplified some of the systems that we had, and I also decided to like keep the dungeon layout simple. So what I'm saying by that is that we have dungeons, we could have made them twice as big, 3 times more complex, and people would have got lost in them, and we would have artificially inflated the gaming time. But this is not what we wanted to do. We wanted like potentially my mom or Simeon's mom like to kind of enjoy the game and like do something meaningful, kind of like. So we decided to just keep it somewhat straightforward and simple. Simeon, do you have any thought on that?
I think it was very advantageous that we kept it simple, because it also, you know, it's more fun. It's more fun for me. I like to pause, just like going off what you said, PJ, about, enjoying the trees, enjoying the grass, enjoying the environment. If it's not that complex, then I can have time to do that. But if it's more complex, then I feel like if I take that time, I'm going to forget where I am in the level, or it's going to take me too long, and then I'm not going to feel like finishing it. So the simplicity definitely fit, I think, with the rest of what we were going for as well, and enabling me to play kind of like you did, where enjoying each moment.
Yeah. Do you have any preference on gameplay or design as far as that goes, Wookie?
Thanks for including me. No, I like PJ. I've said it before on the podcast. For games like Witcher 3, I just walk the whole map and look at everything, and I natively cleared just about everything on the map. So something like Stones of Harlath, I would probably be doing that too. I'd be poking around and seeing what the plants look like and investigating stuff. So sometimes, it's good to have the action-packed gameplay, but a lot of times, even if there's no content, I might spend 10 hours and.
Yeah, I know Cyril really enjoys his environment design and, his laying out of things. And so I think that's one excellent strength of the art is how things are laid out to be explorable, which is a lot of fun.
And the art itself,
to me,
it's just fantastic. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, to me, exploration is just such a huge driver. I don't know if I mentioned it in the last podcast, but like I'm a big fan of Half-Life, like everybody, and I'm not necessarily talking about Alex, right? I'm just talking about the Half-Life 2 or Half-Life 1. But like the driver for me, like I remember playing Half-Life 1 and 2 and enjoying the hell out of my time. But the driver for me was discovering what was the next level and how that next level was different from the previous one. The shooting, I kind of like. I mean, I enjoy shooting. I mean, you see, I'm doing shooters, so that's something that I enjoy very much. But to me, like the principal motivator was moving forward, seeing what was next. And so all the games that I make, I try to kind of like. I mean, basically, we design the games we like to play, right? And so Stones of Harlath, Shock Troops, Theta Legion to some extent, we are designing them to be as diverse as possible, to kind of like always have that kind of like, wow, oh, I just came out of that tunnel and now I'm like in that open space station. Oh, I came out of that dungeon. My previous dungeon was underground and was a mine. Oh, the next one is kind of a castle, or the next one is a crypt. Like that's one thing in Stones of Harlath. Like each dungeon feels very, very different than the previous. There are not two dungeons that look the same, and we believe that for players, it's a reward in itself, right? To kind of like get to explore a new place.
Yeah, I fully agree with that I've played Theta Legion, I've played Stones of Harlath, and it is just like you say, everything. It's always like the next experience is quite different, and that's. I think the first game that did that to me, like you've mentioned, was World of Warcraft, where like we got in there way back when, and the game was a lot harder, took a lot longer, but we just explored the hell out of every zone, and like the next zone was always completely different. Like you went from frickin' Loch Modan to like Desolus.
Yes.
Completely different.
I mean, World of Warcraft
and yeah, it's so good.
World of Warcraft, their world building is absolutely. I mean, and World of Warcraft was a huge source of inspiration for Stones of Harlath.
Nice.
Like I had like hundreds and hundreds of screenshots, kind of like as I was working and as I was making like how like there are a lot of lessons to learn from World of Warcraft, like how their color palette. Like one thing that is extremely impressive. I mean, that I've always been like absolutely in love with is how each region has kind of like a dominant color palette, and all of those colors are kind of working well together. That's definitely something that I was like super attentive to when designing Stones of Harlath. Like you'll see, I mean, I'm pretty sure that you know that like each dungeon has like a dominant color. It has like kind of a main color, and then a of like so. Yeah, Stones of Harlath. When people like ask me to describe it, I usually say it's a poor man's Skyrim. But the reality is that it's a poor man's World of. Well, it's not World of Warcraft because there is no RPG element and no inventory and no character progression and things like that. But yeah, the visuals are definitely inspired by World of
Mm-hmm. I remember, Cyril, when we were first discussing what the levels would entail and how they would look, how you had showed me all the mood boards that you had put together with all the color palettes and everything. That was a great discussion. I definitely enjoyed seeing what your plan was for the visuals.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were
that-
lots of mood boards.
I was going to say, anyone that listens to our podcast regularly knows how bad I am with like remembering names and things. So clearly, like, I don't know the last time I played World of Warcraft, but if I can remember names of areas like Lochmodan and Essalus and Badland, like all that, like clearly it like really impacted me. The fact that I can remember Theta Legion and Stones of Harlath is actually pretty good for me. So
Good. We like it like that.
I haven't heard a lot of devs talk about like the mood boards and color palettes too. It's interesting that you go into that much detail. It seems like a lot of people, and not slamming anybody, a lot of people just sort of jump in and start tinkering instead of saying, how do I want the player to feel while going through? What do I want them to see? They're just like, hey, this might be fun and it might work out, but it really shows with some of these things. Is like some younger folks that didn't play a lot of like Super Nintendo, some of the textures and stuff you've got, there used to be like side-scrolling mech games and stuff on Super Nintendo where the art was just like, it can't be topped because it's just so, like you were saying, crisp and clear. It's just so tight. Like some of those just Nintendo, like Japanese developers had like that pixel art was down like so hard, and you've got it nailed on some of these environments. Like when the flashlight goes through the corridor, it looks like those panels from those old games I remember. I can't remember the names of those games because I got the PJ disease there, but it looks like you're walking through a Super Nintendo. Oops, sorry, banging stuff, talking with my hands. It's great to do this in VR because you can see me talking with my hands.
Yep.
But like, it just looks like you're walking through my favorite SNES games, like the whole catalog. There's stuff that is just making me feel like, man, I need to break out the SNES. Like, wait, why don't I just play this instead?
Yeah, I mean, it's so to go back on the mood boards, because I like short development cycles, that means that I try to be as efficient as possible, meaning like not waste too much time. And so I like to go into something with a plan. And so the mood board and kind of like starting to kind of have an idea of like how I want things to look and feel. First, it helps me kind of like keep myself honest with like what I'm creating and kind of like go back to the mood boards. Like, did I achieve that particular look that I was after? It's also great when you start working with someone because you can show them, even though you may not have everything built yet, you can show them this is the vision behind. Mm-hmm. One side reason and cause for this being also so important for me is that I also teach game design. So I spend a whole lot of time telling my students, explaining how to plan ahead and how to do mood boards, and they are actually graded on some of them and things like that. And so if I was not doing it, like I basically like what is the expression? I put my mouth where my money is, or whatever.
Money where your mouth is. Yeah.
Some gigs I've worked at eating your own dog food is some of the.
Okay, so I'm eating my. I kind of like that. I'm eating my own dog food.
Funny. It makes you stop and you're like stop conversation, and you're like, okay, that makes sense.
Do you have like once a quarter, like where you teach, like, okay, it's time to grade the teacher's game, and they all play it and they tell you what they think?
Well, I mean, so usually, well, last year was particular because it was pandemic year, right? So all the classes were remote. I have a huge Discord server with all my students on it, and we were on Zoom and on Discord, etc. But the year prior, like when I was working on Theta Legion, I would bring my gaming class and I would like have students play test it. Because I think it's important for them to kind of like see that, you know, like we talk a lot about, like when we are in school, we talk a lot about passion, about effort, about like commitment and all that stuff. And so, well, if I show them that, hey, I'm doing it as well, it kind of, I mean, I don't know. I want to hope that it's inspiring for students to see that their professor is also doing this, that it's not, I'm not a jaded guy that is like just teaching from afar, but that I'm also in the middle of it, and I'm passionate as hell.
Leading by
it.
example.
Now, I would not necessarily ask them to grade my game because I would be afraid of revenge grading.
Let me see your mood board, sir.
but I mean, I think that all my students know that I'm open to critique. Like, I mean, there is one thing that I'm known, maybe it's because I'm French, but like my critiques can be, I don't spend a lot of time beating around the bush. I usually kind of go directly to kind of like, so they know that I can be very frank in my critiques, but they also know, I hope, that they can be frank with me. Like if they don't like my game, they should tell me. Or if they think that something could be better, they should tell me, because nobody gets better by having people kind of like try to manage them or try to kind of like, save them. No, it's like if you think something can be better, say it. Now, the other person may say, hey, you know what? I appreciate your opinion, but this is not what I want to do. Or I cannot do that, or this is out of scope and things like that. But I think it's always good to have suggestions. So, yeah, students, I'm very excited. This coming quarter, we are going back. So it's going to be kind of hybrid. Like some will be in the virtual. And I'm kind of like very excited to kind of bring back VR games to the class.
Nice.
You had mentioned getting different types of suggestions and deciding whether or not which ones you would respond to by acting them out, which ones you would say, oh, perhaps that's not in scope. I think that's kind of a secret skill that you develop when making games, especially indie games, is suggestion management. How do you take suggestions and know when to act on them and when it's really best not to? So.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. Scoping, the only reason why we can make those games and ship them, you have hundreds and hundreds of people that start making VR games. You have not necessarily that many people that finish and ship them. And understanding, like keeping your eyes on the prize and understanding how to keep in scope is one of the most important dev skill ever. And that's a thing like 200% agree with Simeon. It is a skill that needs to be gained ASAP.
Yeah, it's funny. We talked to a lot of devs, obviously, and I don't think I've heard that term yet. So that's interesting.
Have none of them said scoping?
I don't think so. Not really.
That's the number one killer. Maybe it's needs to be said to some folks then, because.
Oh yeah. Scoping is so important. Like that's, yeah, it's so easy to get. Sorry.
It could be just that they don't want to talk about. Maybe they think that's too boring of a topic to talk about, which obviously it's not. But it's just, it was strange to me that I haven't heard that yet. Talking to as many devs as we talked.
I mean, how many of them are like, I got to put ray tracing in my game now? Like, do you?
Well, but that's how you tank a studio, right? I mean, that's how you go out of budget, or that's how you end up with people that are crunching all the time and that cannot have a personal life. I mean, to me, like, again, I worked in the advertising industry for like 22 years. Scoping is something that I learned, like, working on like media campaigns and or like big clients and things like that. It's like, well, if you have 3 months to do something, there is no time to waste, and you cannot waste time on stuff that is not essential. And you need to understand everything that is essential right away so that you can kind of organize like the workload and the people. And yeah, to me, scoping is like the most important thing.
Makes sense.
As well as, this is what is in scope, and just as important as this is what is not in scope. This is what we are exactly not going to do. Even just working in tech and automating stuff, I have to tell people we're not going to do that. Like, it's not just that we haven't discussed it. It might get added in later. Not even a phase 2, maybe phase 10. It's not going to happen right now. And you have to say that, otherwise they'll be like, you have to manage those expectations. They'll always want it.
Mm-hmm.
You got to just
Absolutely.
say, no.
No, absolutely. I mean, that can, as I say, that can kill a team, that can kill a project, and then people are less motivated because they are overworked. Again, there is enough during Stones of Harlath. Shock Troops are extremely well scoped. I know exactly how many missions. I know exactly how many environments. Like I have a spreadsheet with all of those things. I know exactly what I'm designing, etc., etc. For Stones of Harlath, same thing. It was extremely scoped. It was like the project was managed on Trello on a daily basis and things like that. Even with that level of commitment, we still had like moments where like things kind of popped out of nowhere and we had like emergencies and things like that. So Simeon had to work some nights late or some weekends and things like that. Even with us being kind of extremely reasonable, can you imagine if we were just like kind of like doing that? He would still be working on Stones of Harlath, the poor guy.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even be a cube. I would be a puddle.
Yeah.
It would be a
Well, I think
it would be
the cube
it would be a
people-
particle engine.
the cute people observe a 9-day work week, so you might be okay. I don't know.
Oh, all right.
The shit's always going to happen. So as long as you do what you do up front to minimize the shit, then the shit that is going to happen you can manage in bite-sized pieces, hopefully. But oh boy, when people don't, I don't know what went into these games that you guys made. It sounds like I'd like to see these spreadsheets. Not really. I don't want to show them, but like, I can just imagine how we keep saying you focus on efficiency. When you're talking about that stuff, that's kind of like, I thought my brain worked that way. That, how do you see all that stuff beforehand? Do you just sit down and just think your way through it, or while you're developing the last game, or is your brain working on this game before you get to the spreadsheet? How does that all into place?
It's a little bit of both. Because I think that there are various. There is a sequence, right? When I work on a game, as I was telling you, like there is a part of it where I work kind of like myself on it, and it's like I still have my mood boards because I still want to kind of like I don't want to waste my own time because my own time is limited. So I want to make sure that like if I have like I don't know 4 or 5 or 8 hours to work on a level. I want to do something meaningful in those 4 or 8 hours and not have to redo it. So, I mood board it. But then when I'm making those things, I'm kind of like iterating and kind of playing with it and things like that. And that's going to kind of like these kind of like first elements of creation. So for example, for Shock Troops or even for Stones of Harlath, like by mid-November of 2019, I already had like a small portion of the island that looked exactly the way I wanted it to look. So that's another thing that I teach my students is to do what we call the beautiful corner. It's like you're going to take a small portion of your game, like just like a corner, and you're going to kind of develop it full on, like everything, the right textures, the right lighting, and all the right stuff. And that's going to be your kind of template for everything else. And you'll bring everything else back to, oh, does it look as good as this, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that while you're doing this, you're also going to start kind of like discovering what is the particular pipeline, the particular organization of what you're creating. And this usually is something that you're kind of like taking notes on, and that helps you kind of like anticipate what is it how long it's going to take you to kind of create other pieces, etc. So the more you work on it, the better you become at it. And so by the time Simeon or Michel arrive, like I have a pretty good idea of how long it takes me to do some things and what are the pipelines and how many materials, etc. So that kind of allows me to kind of like anticipate, okay, so we usually work milestone per milestone. So for example, when Simeon joined the project, which was in February of 2020, we kind of like sat down. So you guys are familiar with the Agile methodology, right? So we every milestone is always about making what I call a minimum viable product. So technically, every milestone is in a shippable state. So Simeon and I sat down and it's like, okay, well, we are setting the next milestone in 2 months. What is it that we can? So there is a bunch of environments that are there. They are ready for you to kind of like start plugging some code on and things like that. What is the game about? The game is about doing some magic. and about swinging a shield and a sword. Okay, well then, can we in 2 months have a couple basic enemies, 2 spells, and the fighting working? And Simeon was like, yeah, I don't see that being a problem. And so that's kind of what we worked on. We worked on that feature and say, okay, now that we have this, we finished milestone 1. It was on time. We were very happy with where it was going. Okay, so what is going to be the next milestone? Oh, the next milestone, well, I think we should like build our first dungeon. And 2 more spells. And so we kind of iterate on top of it. But the more we work, the more we understand like how long these things take. And so the more and more precise we become at planning. So first, there is kind of like that scope thing that I was talking, is that even the milestones are extremely scoped, and it is a scope that we both agree on, we both commit to it, etc. And so the scope is very tight for the first milestones. And then after that, we have a better idea of how to kind of like, so for example, like, we keep playing that video of Shock Troops. This is 2 months of work, like that, the 4 levels. So that's the first mission. That's the introduction mission. So you have like that's 2 months. And so when I sat down with Michel, we were talking, okay, what can we do in those 2 months? Can we have a gun? Where can we have 2 guns? Can we have the reload? Can we have the radar? And so we designed that, and then now we are going to, we haven't had our meeting yet, where we are going to define what the next milestone is, which is planned for December. But at some point next week, I'm going to sit down with him, and then we are going to kind of like look at the content plan that I laid out and extract from that content plan like stuff that we have time to build between now and December. Does that somewhat answer your question on how we?
Yeah. Well, overboard for me. I mean, I do the Agile thing in my brain a lot. My workplace doesn't do it, but this is like master class for anybody who's listening. Like, this is exactly how you need to work, live, and run school right here. This is awesome.
I was going to say that exact same thing, sharing so much good experience that I hope you have a lot of viewers for this. I think they'll learn a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a coder or designer or anything, but I kind of want to take your class.
Enroll. I teach at SCAD, and you will be welcome.
Do you teach any like snippet classes of like mood boards? Like just that one? Because that one's fascinating to me.
So I teach I teach a whole bunch of different classes, but like the ones that I teach the more often are an intro to programming, which is kind of funny because I'm not a professional programmer, but I think that's kind of like a good class for me because I'm an artist, and so it shows like we have a lot of students that are kind of afraid of programming, and I think like for their first contact with programming, having it taught by someone that kind of enjoy art and know why programming is so helpful and so fun, because I have a lot of fun programming, and sometimes help make a difference. I teach board game design, so I love board games, and I actually Simeon and I still have a plan to kind of finish a board game that I started that I want to kind of like ship at some point. So yeah, board game design is super fun. So I teach board game design, and then I teach a whole bunch of studio classes of like production classes, and so that's where I teach students how to make a mood board, how I teach them how to manage a project using Agile. So like a lot of them don't know Agile when they arrive, and so I kind of present the methodology. I help them kind of like do their sprints, and by the time they graduate, like they are running everything Agile. Pretty fun.
That's fantastic.
And during those production classes, I teach them how to make a trailer. I teach them, and then obviously there is a whole bunch of kind of art direction, like color palettes, shapes and forms, and composition, and a whole bunch of stuff. But they are not necessarily classes that are dedicated. It's not like, oh, this is a shape and composition class. No, It's kind of a production class. And then within the class, I have lectures that are going to touch different subjects, depending on what the students are working on.
Yeah.
And talking about speed, my capstone classes are Studio 2 and Studio 3, which are like the last classes that students are going to take. Where I teach, we have quarters that last 10 weeks. So Studio 2 and Studio 3 are 2 classes that are connected, where students form teams in Studio 2, and they do a project during 10 weeks. And then we usually have a break. And then after the break, they come back to the next class and they finish their project. So we have a whole bunch of like students, like everybody in my school make a game in 20 weeks. Like, I repeat that. Everybody that is in my school make a game in 20 weeks. Simeon made a game in 20 weeks. Every single one of my students make a game in 20 weeks. So 20 weeks is not a lot. You made, you made several. I mean, because he also made a game alone in Studio One. But so the point is that when you have 20 weeks to make a game, you have to kind of be sharp and you have to take the right decisions and things like that. So making mood boards to know where you're going and things like that, like, becomes super, super important.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff, indie game devs probably don't know any of this until they finished a game, because, you know, kind of got to work backwards the way you're doing. You have to know what the finished product is. And for people that work with like data, it's like writing, you know, if somebody wants a report, here's the columns and crap I want. Well, then you got to go figure out what pieces you need to put together to make that happen. And this is exactly that for game design in a nutshell.
Well, I mean, and again, you know, it's not because it's creation that it cannot be organized and have like some sort of a, I'm not going to say science, but some sort of a methodology behind it. I think methodology is something that is very important.
Well, so like, you know, traditional painters had to know how to mix the right paint. I mean, you got to know how to stretch a canvas. You got to do all that crap. That's the same kind of thing, just on keyboards.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And I actually went to school for 3D game, like game animation and stuff like that. But it was quick and concise and everything, but there was never anything that was kind of like as tight as what you're doing. So I'm kind of jealous that the school I went to, it's probably pushing 15, 20 years ago. They didn't have quite that same methodology. You know, each semester was like 1 month long, so they just sped us through stuff, and I learned a lot. Still kind of like, oof.
Well, I mean, and these things evolve over time, right? I mean, I'm also like, I'm also the product of. To me, the school, when they hired me, they hired someone that was coming from the industry, right? So someone that was a creative director that had like managed people and things like that. So a lot of the things that I teach my students are things that I kind of like learn as I was working on projects or on indie games and things like that. And so I would assume that the professors that will be teaching our students in 20 years, like, it gets better and better and better, right? I don't necessarily think it's necessarily the fault of your school. 20 years ago, a lot of those people were still kind of like figuring it out. Now we have like 20 years of having figured it out, so we can share a more solid experience. And the more that industry is going to mature, like, you know, one thing that I absolutely dislike is like that kind of crunch culture, right? Where it's like, you hear of those studios that are like, oh, we are going to put our magic dust and then the game will be awesome and things like that. It's like, no, like, take decisions at the right time and don't kind of like hope that people will kind of like inject their personal life and their personal time to kind of make up for your mistakes or lack of decision and things like that. This is because we are still in a very young industry, but I can guarantee you that in 10, 20 years, like, I'm pretty sure that this will become much, much less the norm, because people will be like, well, this is not sustainable. So I think that as an industry, we are improving. The other thing is diversity, right? I mean, like, the video game industry was not a very diverse industry. But it's improving. It's getting better. I have a practically 50-50 gender parity in my classes. I'm super excited about that. So I think that, you know, all of those things are improving every year. And when I have that story, I don't know if I told you last time, that I usually tell my students, because it's like, I'm not like the guy that always make the right decision, right? So when I was a student, I did a master in multimedia. Like, that thing was barely, internet did not existed at that time, or it was just rising. Like, it was starting to be there. And in my last year, I had to take a path, and there were two paths. And there was like, one path was internet and multimedia, hypermedia, and the other path was CD-ROM creation. And I was like, you know what, that internet thing, I'm not sure. So I'm going to take CD-ROM because it's a better, it's a better choice. Well, guess what? So all of that to say that again, you know, like the professors at that time, they did the best they could with something that was like really emerging.
Yeah, it's true. That's a fair point.
Not
Simeon,
to break up the. Oh, go ahead.
Are you looking at me?
Yeah.
Well, at the side of your cube, I don't know what's the front.
Oh, you can't.
I know who I'm looking at. Who are you looking at?
Well, Simeon comes from that school, so I was thinking that maybe he wanted to kind of like express like how.
Oh well, I absolutely agree. I think that was one of the things you mentioned earlier about bridging between one semester and the next with the same project. That sounds very unique to me. I don't know if other schools do that, but I haven't heard of it. And I think that's something that for me enabled me to finish a project with a higher fidelity, you know, a higher quality product with a group of people, you know, carrying over from one semester to the next. I got to know those people better. So, I mean, if you want to learn how to create a product and then before jumping into the indie industry, I think that's a great way to go. Multiple semester project.
And it's what a jet in there when Simeon, when you said, "Are you looking at me?" Even your cube in VR was expressive because your cube was like, and I was like, only in VR. You can't do that in any other game. Flat white cube, like, oh snap.
No, it's true. It's like he can like.
I've had my back to you this whole time. You don't know.
Yeah, he keeps looking at the live on hair sign, actually.
Yeah.
Well, before the time is up, you've been watching your lovely game Shock Troops on the screen here. Is there anything you want to talk about specifically with that, or anything you want listeners or anyone watching to know?
Yeah, I mean it's well, obviously, so it's the spiritual successor of Theta Legion. Kind of exists in the same world. I mean, it's done very differently. There is a lot of stuff that I learned as I was designing Stones of Harlath. Some mistakes that I realized I made that I'm correcting with the next project. So it's going to be much more packed with, like, you can see there is a lot of content, like for Theta Legion, and to an extent the Stones of Harlath, the levels sometimes were a little empty. Here I have found a new pipeline that allows me to kind of like have as many items as I want in it without hindering performance. So that allows me to go way more to kind of like set dress the environments a lot more. And also, because I approach the way textures are done very, very differently. So it's a completely new pipeline, right? Stones of Harlath was done the same way that Theta Legion was done, using a lot of like textures that would repeat themselves and things like that. For Shock Troops, it's completely different. All the textures are like painted as like one material. So that allows me to kind of bake a lot more detail and a lot more uniqueness into them. I want this to be the ultimate. So it's going to be a first-person shooter, but like the design pillar is that it's going to be an epic first-person shooter. Like I want players to be wow. So on the video, and the video doesn't show the full thing. It kind of cuts early, but like, and unfortunately, the parts that are cut are the best part. But like you have a train ride, like you have a thing where you're fighting on a train that is moving at full speed in a tunnel. There is a portion of it where you're like in a space station and you can see the planet below you. So when you're in VR, like you're in, and so every level I want to kind of like something like that. Like I want to kind of like have a constant wow factor. So it's not just going to be a shooter. It's going to be, I want it to be an experience. I want it to be something like, even when you're done shooting everything, maybe stay in the level and kind of like backtrack a little bit to kind of look at things. without having people shooting at you and stuff like that. It's like I really want to kind of like, that's a thing that for all the games that I make, I hope that people will say, oh, they have a great sense of place. Simeon was saying it like, I like my environment design. Like, if I was not an indie, like if I had to kind of like get a job somewhere, like I would most likely be an environment artist, because I absolutely adore making environments. Like, I'm just having a lot of fun doing those. And so I hope that when people kind of like see our levels, they see that love and passion. But yeah, no, I mean, do you have any particular questions about Shock Troops? Or it's difficult for me to talk about it because I know like everything is in my head, but I don't know what people want to know.
And again, like, you don't have to answer specifics if you don't want to. I'm just curious, compared to Theta Legion, which, again, like, and I'm not just saying this because you're here, like, the two games of yours that I've played and the looks of this, like, are just right up my alley. Like, I love them. They're perfect. I adore them. Keep going. So when maybe not to compare this to Theta Legion, but what are a few things that, aside from like with the levels and stuff, what are some differences that you didn't get to do maybe in Theta Legion that this finally allowed you to do, type of thing?
Well, the amount that of set dressing in each level is like 10 times more than Theta Legion and Stones of Harlath. I mean, I think that Simeon will agree with me, right? I mean, like, these levels are way more detailed. The sprites, when I did Theta Legion and when we did Stones of Harlath, I was using 64 by 64 sprites. And then midway through Stones of Harlath, I was like starting to kind of like regret that choice, because going 128 by 128 is a lot more work, but it also allows us to have like sprites that have a lot more expressive definition. And particularly when they get close to you, and that's the reason why, like, in our update for Stones of Harlath in 1.3, like, I actually hired a pixel artist to redo all the sprites at a higher resolution. I don't know if you saw the difference, but it allows you to kind of like understand like the NPCs and the enemies much better. So natively, Shock Troops has those kind of higher resolution sprites, higher resolution textures. Also, the textures are actually sharper. The lighting is about the same, and then the next part is the gameplay. So Theta Legion was pretty much a run and gun, like it was Doom, right? I mean, Theta Legion, like when I started it, I wanted to kind of emulate Doom. On this one, like, there is the will to kind of tell a story a lot more than we did for Theta Legion. So there is a lot more story elements baked in the missions and things like that. And there is a lot of stuff that you will do with the world, like you have to press buttons, collect items. There is a whole bunch of stuff. So it's not just going to be kind of like shooting stuff. It's also going to be kind of like having an adventure in space.
That's awesome. Yeah, Theta Legion, to me, the first time I played it was almost like being Duke Nukem in the Alien setting, which is perfect. It was awesome.
Yeah, we are going to go way creepier in Shock Troops, like because of that newfound pipeline allows me to have so much more detail in my environments. I'm really going to go to town. Super awesome.
I love that you have like the scanner from Alien, like it gives it even more of a creep factor when it's like boop boop boop.
Yeah, particularly because there will be moments in the game where it will stop working.
Awesome.
But you get him to rely on it, and you take it away. That's cruel.
Of course,
I love it.
Well, but that's how you get jump scares, right?
Yeah. So, again, comparing the two games, like, do you have a certain game length in mind, or are you kind of just shooting for like kind of the same small bite-sized things?
So we are going to try to. Right now, I have 16 levels planned. So that's a lot more than what we had in Theta Legion. That's actually a lot more than what we had in Stones of Harlath as well. Then as I'm making those levels, I'm going to kind of have them play tested to see a little bit of the length and see where I need to add. Sorry.
If you need a volunteer to play test somewhere.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, so
The genuine
Here is
concern for your.
oh yeah, I thought you were like saying like you.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. So well, I'll touch upon that. So going to playtest them to kind of like, I got a little bit stinged by some of the critiques on like, oh, Stones of Our Life is too short. Like that's of all the critiques that people things that they did not like about the game, that's the one that kind of stung the most. So I'm going to make damn sure that the next game I have a much better understanding of how long it takes for people to kind of like complete those missions and make sure that we go at least for 3 or 4 hours worth of gameplay. So that means either adding some content or making some of the levels a little bit more complicated to navigate. They are less kind of like, oh, well, I know exactly at all time where to. To go back to the playtesting, so the way I organized it, because I thought I should explain that. We selected 5 people we gave access to our first build to 5 people, and not one more. And those 5 people are all people that talked about both Theta Legion and Stones of Our Life. And Stones of Our Life sold very well. We are very happy with our numbers.
Glad to hear that.
we did not spend well, we spent maybe I spent $100 in marketing.
Wow.
So all of those sales, they come from like people like you guys, people like content creators on YouTube and things like that talking about our game. And so when we had like people talking about Theta Legion on the go, Theta Legion on the Rift, Stones of Our Life, etc., what I wanted to do is like do something. It's like, well, you know what? You're going to have like exclusive access to our next game, and you can put that on your channel, and you can create content, and it's going to hopefully do good for your channel, and that's our thank you, right?
Nice.
And then every milestone we are going to add more partners. So I mean, obviously, yes, I mean that's the second time we are coming here. You can expect us to kind of like recognize that and grant you kind of like same thing, like access to this. We want to reward. I'm not going to look at like how many followers a YouTube channel has. I'm more interested into kind of like preserving and cultivating relationships with content creators and things like that, because I do believe that for a team like us, that's how we get our eyes on our products, right? And so the people that help us sell our game, well, they'll get dibs on the next one, right? It's kind of natural.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, I was happy you just had that one post with like a collage of everyone that talked about it, and that was touching enough for me. But
yeah, we got hundreds of videos, like and some ranging from like a couple of views to like Wolf and VR had like 100,000 views on the video. It's like, well, yes, of course that's helping us, right? I mean, there is no question. Like, and yeah, I was kind of shocked. Like, if you go search like Stones of Our Life on YouTube, like you're going to get a whole lot of content. And for
that's
us,
awesome.
you know, we got some like the first day we got some reviews that were a little bit disappointing for us, and we were a little down because you know, we spent a year and a half of like our free time building something, not being paid and things like that. And then like the first feedback that we're getting is people that are kind of like not necessarily loving our game. That takes you down a little bit. And then we see like videos after videos of people just having fun with the game. And I can tell you that re-energize you. Like these videos, like they made my day every day, right? Like, it was like the money, you know, the money you receive it like a month or a month and a half later. The videos as they come, as people show that they're enjoying your product, they just make you happy. I mean,
yeah.
So yeah, no, it was a big thing. We already had like a lot of people covering Theta Legion, but like the coverage on Stones of Our Life went like bananas. Like I'm still like, there are still people today. I still saw a new video, like, and we try to kind of respond to them and like acknowledge them and like them and things like that. So to me, that's a symbiotic relationship, right? Content creators and developers, like that's how as an indie we get a chance. Like we don't have the marketing budget of Call of Duty, but what we can do is we can have a little community around us that can kind of help us kind of like put eyeballs on our product.
Yeah, and your viewpoint may be a little different on this, but I'm assuming that when like Stones of Harlath first launched, like, you know, people are expecting like VR, like big, more grand games, and I think a lot of people are younger, like maybe they haven't ever played like a Pixar game from back in the day, so that might have like kind of taken them off guard, not knowing what to expect, even though you kind of, I think your description says it, and you know, a lot of people don't read it. They just, well, that looks cool, let me try it out. And I'm just curious if that was kind of the start of it, because clearly, as a little time went on, it was pretty quick from my viewpoint, where it started to take off and kind of found like the people that really loved it and really liked it and understood it, the charm of it and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm not sure if the pixel art, I mean, some people really did not like it, that's for sure. But I think it's a minority. I think most people kind of liked. I think it's the length, the simplicity of it, the humility of it. I think that, you know, again, to go back to scope, we could have like a lot more spells or more complicated mechanism and an inventory and a skill tree for the character, etc. But all of that had a lot of complexity, and it's not just complexity in making the game; it's also complexity in testing it. If you have different skill trees, you need to test them all. Then you need to make sure that they are balanced, etc., etc. So my point is that we made a game that was very sober, like simple, humble, strong core mechanics, a cool, cute art style. And a scope that was manageable for two of us working on this as during the weekends and the late nights and things like that. And so I think that some people got disappointed that it was not Skyrim, right? But I mean, like Skyrim is a team of like 500 people, 1,000 people.
Yeah.
Stones of Harlath is a team of 2.
Skyrim never took 5 years. I don't know. Like the hubris of some fans, it's just sort of like, you know how much it goes into doing this stuff? Like it's inventory system. Every game has it, so you should just have one, right? Because of whatever reason. But it's like, well, then you have a UI, and then you got to click things and move it, make sure it doesn't delete the item. I mean, there's 8 million things to test with that just for basic inventory. And then everyone, you put it in there, and then they're going to be like, well, why can't I select all the things I want to sell and push sell once? Why do I got to click? And then it's just like, go home, shut up.
No, I mean, and you know, I'm not going to like. I don't remember who I was telling that to. Being a dev is learning how to see the silver lining. So I'm not going to say that it's about, you know, like when people complain about the game being too short. What I want to read is that they enjoyed the experience and they wish it was longer.
They will buy the expansion.
The thing is that, of course, like, you know, with a bigger team and a bigger budget, there is a lot of more stuff that I would have liked to do with Stones of Harlath. But with the team that we had and the time frame that we wanted, so that we don't exert ourselves, this is the best we could do. And I'm damn proud. Like, I'm super proud of what we've done. Like, I'm super proud of the game. Like, there is not 1 second in that game that I don't firmly stand behind. And there is not one choice that I regret.
Awesome.
I think it's fun. And that's the same thing for Shock Troops. I'm super excited where it's going. Is it going to beat Destiny in terms of like content? Or no, of course not. It's a game made by 2-3 people if we count the sound designer and musician. But I can tell you that it's a game that is made with love. That every detail matters to me. And yes, there may be 500 of them and not 10,000, but that's the 500 that I can manage. So that's the thing, right? I would rather kind of do something kind of like controlled and polished rather than kind of try to overextend myself and not be able to deliver on any of those.
Yep. Hashtag scope.
What was
Just
that?
going-
Hashtag scope.
It's such a shame too, because like I hope you get like bigger teams of more people with your guys' mindsets, because the way you're talking about the planning, that's the kind of stuff you need for the groups that have the bigger teams, because a lot of times I think the bigger teams start, fighting over each other. I complain a lot about one of PJ's favorite games, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I think there was like 16 different studios working on that. I walk in and I'm like, why doesn't the long ship feel like a real ship? And PJ's like, well, the little boats later on feel like the real boats. And I was like, would you have like 4 studios working on how the boats feel? Like, my brain just picks it apart. And it's like, well, the backgrounds look great. The characters, maybe not. The voices, somebody slept on that quality control. And I only tear apart the AAA games because it's like, it's Ubisoft with like 30 studios, half of them working on this game.
Well,
Why
to
isn't it-
their defense, the more people you had on, like, the
It's
reality
tough.
of the reality of scoping a project with 2 people, it's way easier to scope a project right with 2 people than scoping a project right with 500 or 1,000. And then once you start adding like third-party studios and things like that, it becomes even more complicated.
Yep.
So
that's what I was getting to. Yeah.
And the reality is that studios, like particularly studios like Ubisoft, because I worked with them, they are extremely organized. Actually, a lot of the stuff that I know, I learned from Ubisoft, from working with them as a third party studio. They were a bliss to work with, and a lot of the processes that I then applied for myself, particularly on the UX. Like I can tell, I worked with Ubisoft in 2009. And the first day, they gave me a UX document that was like 100-page long, that had like all the research, and I was like floored. And as someone that was in advertising and marketing, like I like data, and like they were like super data centric, and it was bliss because the decisions that we made in terms of UX and things like that were super well educated, thanks to the documentation that they give us. So it's not that they are disorganized; it's that sometimes, well, now that you have like 500 people, that means that you have a lot of managers that may or may not agree together, a lot of cooks in that kitchen. With my small teams, it's easy to kind of like keep the vision, right? It's not like and that's actually a thing, right? One day, like someone asked me, Garage Collective, like ideally, like if you could grow to whatever size, like what would you like Garage Collective? It's like, to me, it's like a Garage Collective, like no more than 50 people, maybe even like maybe 50 is too much, maybe no more than 20, like a team of like between 10 and 20, that would be perfect. After that, people lose ownership of what they are working on. So it creates new problems. You have too many middle management, etc., etc. So the reality is that small is beautiful. Small is pleasant, and small is nice. And unfortunately, with the AAA, right, people want their big explosions and they want their ray traced graphics and things like that, and that takes a lot of people to kind of get to that quality. This is. I'm happy. Like if I can keep doing this for the rest of my life, I'll be content. If I can do it with a couple more people and like start hiring people and kind of create a nice little company and things like that, I'll be super happy. Obviously, I think the next game that I'll make will not be pixel art, because like there is a part of me that wants to prove that I can do something else.
But again, with your quick turnarounds and everything we've talked about, you have so many options. Like Shock Troops, you may not think of it as a sequel to Theta Legion, but if you really wanted it to be, it could. And so when you're done with this and you go do another game, you could say, "Oh, I want to do a sequel to Stones of Harlath," or "I just want to do an expansion," and you could. It just lets you do whatever you want, whatever makes you happy.
Let me go on the record on that. I really, 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 really want to do an expansion on Stones of Harlath, and the reality is that there is a big portion of that work that has started. Now, I think it's Simeon, like particularly the last month, of production, a lot of it was riding on Simeon's shoulder. The QA stuff, I helped where I could, but a lot of the QA effort, for example, was Simeon going back in his code and like fine tuning some little things and things like that. So Simeon needs to take a little bit of a break. Like we launched in June, and you saw like we launched in June, and then by early June, by mid-June, we had the first content update. By the end of June, we had the second content update. By August 20th, we had the third content update and the reversion. Simeon needs a break. But as soon as Simeon is going to be, or else he's going to be not a cube, but a square. I don't want to flatten him. But as soon as Simeon like gives me like, it's like, hey, you know what, Cyril, I'm re-energized and I'm ready to go and things like that. Like then we will start planning like what's the future for Stones of Harlath. We haven't told the whole story yet.
Awesome.
And Shock Troops is specifically designed. So I don't know if you see, and I know that like the videos may not be in sync for everybody, but like there is a big table in the video with planets, like a galaxy and planets that are kind of turning and things like that. This is where you choose your missions. So that means that if I want to add a whole new bunch of environments and missions and things like that, I had a planet. So that's one thing that we did poorly in Theta Legion, is that each level was kind of leading you to the next level, and kind of like changing the order of levels and things like that was
problematic.
Not problematic on the technical aspect, but problematic on the narrative aspect. With Stones of Harlath, using that island as a hub was kind of like my reaction to that thing that I did not like about Theta Legion, where I was like, oh, I want to be able to add content the way I want. And have a play where it's not going to disrupt the existing content. With this, we are going one step further. Is like we have that kind of like old navigation table that allows us to kind of like put a new planet in there if we want, whenever we want. So Shock Troops is built from the get-go to be extremely modular.
Awesome. Just you saying you have plans for everything makes me happy, because obviously I enjoy what you guys do immensely.
Yeah, I mean, if Shock Troops sells well, there is a. I have right now. I'll give you a scoop. So right now, like the way I plan my environments, it's really about like what players will feel, right? So this is the spooky derelict space station. So that's the first mission. I have a fire world, which is going to be like a lot of like browns and yellows and reds and things like that, and a lot of like lava and meteorites falling and smoke, things like that. I have an ice world, which is like obviously going to be much like more colder tones, like lots of blues and ice, like that. And I do have like a very lush, verdoyant planet with like a lot of vegetation and trees and stuff like that. So this is how I'm kind of like planning my worlds. Like, because I know that when you come out of the fire world, and people will be able to tackle them in the order that they want. So once they kind of do the intro mission, then after that they execute. Each mission is going to tell a side of the story, and then once you've done them all, you kind of understand how it works, and then it leads you to the final mission. But so the first mission and the final mission will have to be done in sequence, but all the missions in between will be done, like players will just decide where they want to go next. And when you get out of the fire world and you go to the ice world, then it's kind of like a big change, right? You feel like, oh, it's not like, oh, I feel like I've played that level 20 minutes ago. Like it's going to feel, we want people to be refreshed by the content that we show them. But there is plenty of stuff that can be done. Like even to stay in scope, I'm not going to have time to explore all the things that I want to explore in science fiction. Like being in an asteroid belt. Like I would love to make a thing on like, well, maybe you can jump or teleport from one asteroid to the next.
Jumping would be fucking cool. Sorry.
Or like there is a part of me that really wants to have a thing where like, hey, this time you're not going to shoot, you're going to pilot a spaceship. Like, I mean, there is so many things that we can do, particularly with sci-fi and fantasy. Like it's so open that, yeah, I mean, if the game is successful, expect to see more of it. Stones of Harlath, in my book, was a success. And there is, Simeon and I talked about a lot of things, and new islands, new types of vegetation, new climate, new ecosystems, different weapons. Like, sky's the limit.
It's exciting.
Simeon, anything you want to add on this?
Nothing in particular, but I'm as excited as you are.
Awesome.
We'll get your break over with, Simeon. Let's get on this. Come on. Just kidding.
But it's 1 year and a half of development. It's taxing.
Oh yeah,
I bet. Do you have, so when you say a year and a half development, do you have like a kind of a planned time off that you stick to, or do you kind of just, like you said, you kind of already working on it, so you just kind of roll into it, and then you say, hey, I'm ready if you guys are, type of thing?
That's a question for Simeon or for me?
Whoever has an answer, I don't know.
I don't take time off. So that's the reason why I'm like straight out of Stones of Harlath. I studied on Shock Troops. And then, as I said, as soon as I will be almost over with Shock Troops, I will start the next project. But I'm also, it's different. I'm not 20 something. For Simeon, like he has a life ahead of him. Like there is obviously different priorities.
Sure.
So Simeon, I think the question is maybe more for you.
Oh, as far as balancing of time, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on where we are when we finish one project, what Cyril's already begun working on for the next project, that type of thing. Yeah, and honestly, it really depends. It could be different every year as far as how much time is in between projects for me.
Cool. Yeah, it's always nice to hear, like, when you're not working under crunch time or anything similar like that you guys kind of, for you especially, like the next project recharges your battery so you're ready to go, type of thing. You're just enjoying it. Not that you aren't, but everyone's different, so it's just, as long as you guys are getting your relaxation and batteries recharged before the next project, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, I'm also on a timeline. Like, I gave myself 4 years to kind of like see if Garage Collective could grow as a VR studio that makes VR games. So I'm at year 3 now, in the middle of year 3. So I have basically a year and a half left. After that, like there is, like, let's imagine that Shock Troops doesn't meet the success that I hope and things like that. Then yeah, I'll maybe kind of like look ahead of me and say, okay, what's next? Should I keep making VR games that don't have the success that I'm hoping? Or but again, like seeing what we did with Stones of Harlath kind of like fills me with hope that, hey, you know what, this is getting somewhere. But again, I don't want to think of like what's happening it's a little bit like that Agile stuff, right? I'm thinking next milestone is shipping Shock Troops, and that's all I'm thinking about right now. And then once we ship it, we'll see a little bit how the product is received, and then we'll see if there is ground to, hey, should we build the next game, and should it be a DLC, should it be a reboot, should it be a sequel, should it be like, that's we'll decide then.
Awesome. Well, before we wrap it up, is there anything we didn't get to that you maybe wanted to, or anything else you want to share with anyone before we head out? We covered a lot.
Nope. If people wants to have info, the best way to get info is to kind of like follow me on Twitter. This is usually where I post screenshots and stuff like that. Or subscribe on the YouTube channel. Like I'm trying to kind of grow a little bit the Garage Collective channel, and it's working somewhat, but I still wish that I had more people subscribe to the channel. So if you want to make me happy, because every time I get a new follower on YouTube or a new follower on Twitter, I'm happy. So if you want to make me happy, please follow and subscribe. I'm going to be like the YouTubers. Hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. Make it ring.
And if anyone watching or listening, there'll be links to everything in the show notes. So we'll have that there for you to click.
Yep.
But I want to thank you guys again for your time. It's always great talking to you guys. You're very insightful. obviously very passionate, and I love that. And it shows in your games. I love your games, obviously. So I hope you can continue to do what you love and create what I love. So it's a nice symbiotic circle we got there.
Maybe maybe next time you'll try the game and we'll be back on that podcast to talk about it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right.
We'll come at you live from the mission table.
Yeah, we talked about that, right? Bringing some of the assets in the VR space. That would be kind of fun. I could design like a booth that is in the ship, in the Shock Troops ship.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah. But thanks, Cube Simeon. Thanks, Cyril.
Pleasure's all
Thank
mine.
you, everyone. I don't know what. Well, that's obviously this camera. What's happening with this one?
Look at the PJ one. That's the one streaming right now. So
This one?
the lower one.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Hey, mom.
Why is it so low? It's not catching my good side.
It's catching up here. It's just deceiving.
I'm just kidding.
Gotcha. Okay.
You don't have a
Well-
good side to catch.
Simeon's got like 8.
I've got only good sides.
Equally bland, Simeon. Come on. You have a little bit of green below you, though.
I say fresh and clean.
It's your kind of mint. It's your mint attire.
It is. I mean, look at this jawline.
Tic Tacs.
Yeah, it is chiseled. Okay, well, thank you everybody for tuning in. And yep, can't wait to talk more about the next game.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm really bad at this. I'm meaning to do this at the beginning of the shows, but shout out to Spatial Ape. We're live in VR via Spatial Ape. If you don't understand that, click the links in the show notes to check out the video. You can always join our audience, ask questions when we're talking to the devs and whoever. So it's fun time.
It's cool in here.
And we now have bazookas, and you can shoot things.
Yeah, I saw that.
I don't know what that looks like for the viewers, but sure.
I want to shoot
Bounce them off Simeon's head. But don't shoot yourself.
That's completely meta. I'm shooting at the screen. Shooting at the
Hey, that's your next game, an interactive game within VR that you can.
To shoot
Hard up
yourself,
and
you got to
shoot.
kind of turn your controller around.
Oh yeah, you're Wookie is depressed.